What if the plants inside your home were doing more than just sitting there and looking nice? You know that moment when you walk into a room and it just feels different? Lighter somehow, calmer, like the air has a certain softness to it. A lot of old traditions believed that wasn't random at all, that plants could actually shape the feeling of a space, almost like they carry their own kind of presence. But then something else comes to mind. What if it works the other way too? What if some plants don't just add comfort, but subtly change how you feel without you really noticing it day to day? And that leads to a simple but strange question. Are we actually sensing some kind of hidden energy? Or is it just our mind reacting to the environment in ways we don't fully understand yet? Once you start thinking about it, it's hard to ignore. Could something as simple as changing a few plants in your home actually shift the way the space feels? Some people would say it's all about energy. Others would call it psychology. And honestly, it might be a mix of both, or maybe something we don't fully understand yet. But still, there's that small question that sticks with you. Why is it that some rooms feel light and peaceful, while others feel a little heavy or uncomfortable, even when nothing obvious has changed? Same furniture, same lighting, but a completely different feeling. That's exactly why a lot of people start looking into what are often called spiritual plants. Not just as decoration, but for what they represent, things like calm, protection, clarity, even a sense of balance in everyday life. So in the next part, we're going to walk through 10 of these plants that people believe can subtly shift the atmosphere of a home in ways you don't always notice at first, but might start to feel over time. Sage is usually the first plant people bring up when they talk about clearing energy in a space. For a long time, it's been used in different traditions as a way to reset a room, almost like hitting a mental refresh button. Some cultures even burn dried sage in ceremonies, as a symbolic way of clearing out tension or negative feelings and starting fresh. But if you step back from the spiritual side for a moment, sage also feels surprisingly practical. It has a clean, calming scent, and just being around it can create a sense of stillness in a room, like things slow down a little without you trying. And here's something interesting. You don't really need to burn it for it to have that effect. Even keeping a small sage plant in your kitchen or near a window can act like a quiet reminder to pause for a second, breathe, and reset your mind. And maybe that's really what people are responding to. Not something magical, but the simple intention of choosing to reset a space. Have you ever cleaned or rearranged a room and suddenly felt like your mood changed too? Lavender has this interesting effect where you notice it almost immediately, even before you really think about it. The color alone feels soft, and that light purple tone kind of pulls your attention in a calm way. Then there's the scent, gentle, steady, nothing overwhelming, but it seems to slow everything down around it. For a long time, people have associated lavender with relaxation and emotional balance. It's something you'll often find in bedrooms, or in spaces where people just want to unwind after a long day, fall asleep easier, or create a quieter mood at home. What's interesting is that lavender doesn't really try to stand out. It doesn't demand attention like some other plants do. But somehow, it still changes how a room feels just by being there, almost like it lowers the volume of everything around it. If sage is about clearing out what feels heavy, lavender feels more like what comes after, softening everything that's left behind, turning a regular space into something calmer, almost like your mind can finally slow down for a bit without trying. Aloe vera has a very different kind of presence compared to the softer plants like lavender. People often connect it with protection and healing, probably because it's such a resilient plant. It can survive in tough conditions, barely needs attention, and still stays strong. That's why in many cultures it's seen as something that quietly holds a protective energy, almost like it's filtering out what doesn't belong in its space. Then you have basil, which feels completely different. Instead of protection, it's often linked with abundance and flow, things like prosperity, harmony, and a sense of good energy entering the home. You'll often see it placed in kitchens or near entryways, where life and movement naturally come together. What's interesting is how these two feel like opposites, but somehow work together. One feels like it's protecting what you already have, while the other feels like it's opening the door for something new to come in. A kind of balance between holding on and letting in. And it makes you think, are we choosing these plants for what they do, or for what we hope our life feels like? The peace lily has this quiet kind of presence that you don't really notice at first, but you definitely feel it over time. It doesn't try to stand out or take attention in a room. Instead, it just sits there with those soft white blooms that almost feel like a pause in the middle of everything, like a visual reminder to slow things down a little. People also associate it with cleaner air and a fresher environment, which adds to why it's often placed in living rooms or workspaces. It's the kind of plant that makes a space feel more settled, without you really knowing why. Then there's lucky bamboo, and that feels completely different. It's more structured, more intentional. People talk about it in terms of patterns, numbers, and arrangement, like each setup carries a certain meaning or type of energy. When you put them side by side, the contrast is pretty clear. The peace lily feels soft and calming, almost emotional in a quiet way. Lucky bamboo feels more deliberate, like structure and intention brought into physical form, and somehow together they create this balance that feels surprisingly natural, like order and calm meeting in the same space. Rosemary has long been associated with clarity and mental focus. Even the scent itself feels sharp in a way that wakes you up a little, like it cuts through that slow, foggy feeling you sometimes get during the day. That's probably why people have used it for years in study routines or moments where they needed to stay alert and think clearly. There's also this subtle feeling of grounding with rosemary. It's not just about focus. It almost feels like it brings you back into the present, like your thoughts stop drifting as much and settle into something more direct. Then you have the jade plant, and the energy there feels completely different. If rosemary is sharp and clearing, jade is steady and quiet. It doesn't rush. It doesn't change quickly. It just grows slowly over time, almost without drawing attention to itself. People often connect it with long-term stability and prosperity, not in a fast or dramatic way, but more like something that builds gradually in the background. And in a way, it's kind of comforting, like a reminder that not everything in life has to happen all at once. Some things are meant to grow slowly, at their own pace. The snake plant is often seen as one of the most durable indoor plants you can have. It has this tall, upright structure that almost feels intentional, like it's standing guard in a room. That's probably why people associate it with protection and stability. It doesn't bend or spread out much, it just stays firm and steady, even in conditions where other plants might struggle. And part of what makes it so popular is how little it asks for. You don't really need to overthink it or constantly take care of it. It just survives, quietly doing its thing, which gives it this sense of strength without effort. Then you have mint, and it feels like the complete opposite energy. It's fresh, fast-growing, and honestly a little unpredictable in how quickly it spreads. The moment you smell it, the whole space feels lighter, especially in places like kitchens or small gardens. So when you put them together, it's an interesting contrast. The snake plant feels grounded and protective, like it's holding the space together. Mint feels alive and refreshing, like it's constantly bringing movement into the room. And somehow, that mix of stillness and energy feels surprisingly balanced in everyday life. At some point, you naturally start wondering, is any of this really about energy, or is it just the way we respond to the spaces we live in? Some people truly believe plants act like emotional connectors, shaping the atmosphere of a room in ways we can't fully explain. Others look at it in a more practical way. More greenery around you usually means less stress, a calmer mind, and just a better overall mood, without needing anything mysterious behind it. And honestly, it might not have to be one or the other. Maybe both ideas overlap more than we think. Because whether you call it energy, psychology, or just habit, the experience itself still feels real. You walk into a room, you feel something shift, even if you can't fully explain why. And in the end, that's usually what people are reacting to anyway, the feeling, not the theory behind it. If there's one thing this whole idea really makes me think about, it's how sensitive we are to the spaces we live in without even realizing it. Small details matter more than we usually give them credit for. A plant sitting on a table, the way sunlight comes through a window in the morning, even a simple scent in the air, all of that can quietly change how a room feels, sometimes more than we expect. And maybe that's part of why people feel such a strong connection to plants in the first place. Not because they're magical or have hidden powers, but because they naturally slow things down. They pull your attention back into the moment, even if just for a second. And that leads to a bigger thought. Maybe the real question isn't whether plants change the energy of a home, but whether we change ourselves when we actually start paying attention to them. Have you ever walked into a room and felt something shift, even though nothing obvious changed? Maybe it wasn't the room at all. Maybe it was just you noticing it a little more deeply than before.